Hello, everybody. My mother always used to say, always be ready and dress up well so you're ready to meet the king. So when you go out, you never know who you can meet, right? And I never did meet the king yet. However, my guest today did. Or did he? I was telling someone about my guest today meeting the king, and my son actually, and he turned around and he said, are you sure he met the king, or is he delusional and on meth? Sorry, I had to put that one out there. I'm going to actually, but with that, let's speak to our guest, Justin Donne. How are you today, Justin?
Terrific. Thank you, Carina. I am great. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Justin, tell us a bit about who you are, and then we'll talk about you meeting the king.
Sure. So my name is Justin Dunn, and I do work here in the United Kingdom. I know I don't sound like I'm from the United Kingdom, and I'm not originally, but I moved here 13 years ago. And today I do work in several areas. I have a portfolio. So one of the things that I do is that I'm regional chair of a government department's disability unit. So I actually help in the field of disabled persons of any type to make sure that things are accessible and that government policy is beneficial. And I work with the ministers and other people from politics to civil servants to everything like that. So in the UK, we call it the Cabinet Office, which is the government sort of department that manages the government. And I'm in charge of the regional, so I'm a regional chair here in the East Midlands of the disability unit, and we have a stakeholders network. So that's what I'm in charge of. So all of the different people that are involved in that in this region, it's called the East Midlands, so that's 5 counties with millions of people here. So everything from health services to local government to policing, everybody that's involved, to charities and nonprofits, because I'm actually chairman of a charity that has that helps a type of disabled person. So through that work, one of the things that I worked on was the coronation, and specifically, I was a accessibility expert, and there was a panel of us. I wasn't the only one, but there was a panel of us who were advising on all things related to accessibility, everything from signage to British Sign Language interpretation, BSL we call it, to quiet areas, to viewing platforms. So people, whether they're in a wheelchair or whether they're autistic or whatever, or both, that we can maximize the accessibility of the coronation. And this was the first time that there was a royal event that was done with any attention paid to accessibility or this much focus on it. Every previous royal event I'm not just talking about the previous coronation 50 some years ago, but I'm just talking about every event that was never a priority. And this was the first time that it was a major priority. So we spent 3 months doing a lot of work to make sure that London, the area, the transportation, that everything that staff were trained was made as accessible as possible within the realm of practicability, obviously, because we're talking about an event hosted in a thousands-year-old abbey. There's limited amount of things that we can do for that. We're also talking about extreme ancient traditions. There's also a limited amount that we can modify the traditions, although there were modifications made to the actual ceremony and everything else. So, and this was something that was endorsed and embraced by the king. So it wasn't an idea that came from below. It was actually an idea that came from above with a lot of compassion. So I think that's how I got involved, and that's specifically what I did this year, the last month. This is fresh, it's top of mind. It's specifically what I did with the king. Now, in answer to your son's question, did I meet? Because you said it originally met the Queen. I actually never met the Queen Elizabeth. I never was in the same space as her, so we never met. But I met Prince Charles a few years ago while I was doing other work for his charitable organization that helps young people to either find a job or start a business, basically. So helping disadvantaged youth to become not disadvantaged. So because I was doing work, I got a chance to meet and shake hands with him, and I actually have a photo to prove it. So I could send that to you, and you could show your son, and you could say, "No, he ain't delusional. Here's a picture of him." Now, of course, nowadays in the days of AI, you could say, "Oh, he probably doctored it or something like that." But this was a few years ago. I think it was in 2015 or so. So we didn't have AI then. So do with it what you will. But yeah, so I got to meet him. So in no way am I pretending to be friends with him or very close to him, or did I work with him closely on a daily? No, that's not what we're saying here. I did some work for him, and I got to meet him. And this time around, I did some more work for him. And so it was. That's kind of the whole story in a nutshell for you, your listeners, and of course your son.
Yes. I love that story. Even though it's still a big thing, right? To actually shake hands with the king, because it's something that you probably you can imagine or you can dream about, right? And what about, it must have also been pretty scary on some level, because it's like, whoa, the king, like, am I good enough to shake the hand of the king? What were you thinking?
Well, when I shook his hand, he was just a prince.
I mean, he was the prince, yes, that's true. That's true, not the king yet.
I'm joking. I understand what you're saying, and I was not intimidated. I was not nervous at all. And I'll tell you why. I'm not sure if it was because of me and I'm so great, but it's because Charles specifically has a way about him, an energy about him that puts people at ease, that makes people comfortable, that is very tolerant, that is very embracive, that just very accepting of who he's talking to. I learned a lot from him. Again, I'm not saying he was my mentor and we worked one-on-one. I'm saying I learned a lot by watching him, by working for him for about 7 years. He has a way of being able to mix with the most privileged of society as well as the least privileged of society. And you think, really? The prince, now the king, can mix with the least privileged? Absolutely. Because I've seen him sit at a little diner table with a bunch of disadvantaged young people as part of the charity work that he was doing and discussing with them the things. And then that was his way of stimulating what could we do? What programs might we generate to help en masse young people into a job or help them get out of this disadvantaged situation they're in. And it was talking to them in a conversation. And he put them at ease and he was able to talk to them. There was no sense of haughtiness or, oh my God, you're talking to this guy. Of course, his staff don't make you feel like that. They make you feel like you're talking to the Lord and Savior or whatever. But he doesn't do that at all. He makes you feel at ease. He makes you feel like he's talking to you as a person of value and that he values you. And so I wasn't nervous at all when I met him because he didn't do any of the things that other people do of his stature. Because, I mean, not saying all royalty do this. I mean, his sister can be very intimidating, and but he doesn't. He puts people at ease. He has a calming energy about him and a caring energy about him. So if I was to assign the labels to what I felt, from him energetically, it would be caring, it would be compassion, calming. And that is kind of what I felt from him. And I got to shake his hand. And I have to say, and I do grip strength exercises. I did martial arts and since I was a kid, since I was a teenager, that was the firmest handshake I have ever felt in my life. And I don't mean like crushing firmness, not like my old piano teacher that used to like to have a contest to see who would, say mercy first, like crush. It's not crushing. It was just like it felt like you were shaking the hand of some solid oak tree, and this is you have to keep in mind, he's not a young man, an older gentleman. And it's like, wow, that is a firm handshake. It's not Schwarzenegger, but it might as well be what I imagine Arnold Schwarzenegger's handshake would be like. I met him at the hair salon, but we didn't shake hands. But I imagine had I shooken hands with Arnold, that's what it would be like. And I was impressed with that. But in no way was I intimidated or felt less or anything like that. And I thought that was very impressive, because there are so many people with less privilege than Charles, with less privilege than the king, who do make you feel less, who do make you feel like you're lower than them in stature or whatever. People, celebrities, or some politicians do that. Even so, some people who don't have that kind of status or are not famous will make you feel like you are less than them in some way. They have an arrogance. They have a conceit or a cockiness. And he had none of that. And he is the king of the entire United Kingdom. And I think that's really interesting. I think it's really interesting.
It's very interesting because, yes, you'd think that he'd say, like, well, you know, I'm the king, like, bow down to me. So I love that like almost that compassion, and to realize that people are people. So it's really very also exciting the way you had to work on that accessibility for the coronation, because I think I had someone a few months back on accessibility. It's quite interesting that we were discussing this, and it's something that as able-bodied people, you don't really think about it, right? Because it's something that you able-bodied, right? You just do life because you can, and it just puts a whole different perception on things. But to have a king that actually thinks about those kind of things is pretty amazing as well.
It is, and I agree with that, because I think that this is probably the first time that we have had a monarch in any country, really, that thinks that deeply about everyone in the society that he is the monarch of, who thinks really down to every detail. And I'm not saying that he sits there strategically obsessing about all of the tactics and That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that he has a compassion, and therefore, you know, he instigates or initiates things like an accessibility panel to say, you know, he didn't do anything for the panel except initiate that spark to say, do something about accessibility, because I care about that. And so the cabinet office, the government decided, the department specifically, I think it's called the Department for Ceremonials, something and something. DCMS department decided to initiate a panel along with some experts and event management and everything to see what can we do to satisfy the king's demand that this be made an accessible event. And I think that's a remarkable thing. And I think, you know, he has suffered a lot of criticism over his lifetime for many things. And having met him, I can absolutely guarantee that he is an extremely intelligent human being. Very, very intelligent, more intelligent than me and many other people. He can speak extemporaneously, meaning without notes, on many, many topics to professors, to people who have PhDs, and he speaks in an enlightened manner, not like they're not rolling their eyes. In other words, he knows what he's talking about, things that he's passionate about.
Yes.
Issues that he cares about, such as the environment, such as sustainable farming, such as health and nutrition. He has educated himself beyond what a normal consumer would. He is, in many ways, an expert in these things. And he's also an artist, and he paints. And I have many Christmas cards with his painting on the front, and not something that you can buy. It's just something that you receive if you had worked for him. So this is somebody with a very deep sense of aesthetics, a deep sense of wisdom that we don't generally allow him to have, especially not the media. And so I think for the first time we have a monarch who has a level of compassion that exceeds any politician, any political leader, elected leader. It's one reason I say we'd be so much better off with him in charge of everything versus the people we voted for. Because how many times you vote for someone based on promises and things they make in a campaign, and then they don't go ahead with it?
Oh,
How many
yes.
times do you vote for someone and then they let you down because they're not really a compassionate human being? They just do things that might, forward their career or not. But you very rarely have someone that's truly a compassionate, caring person up there at the very top. And here we have a monarch who is that. So I'll tell you right now, if he ran in an election, I'd vote for him over absolutely 100% of the politicians in the USA, because I'm an American citizen as well, or in the United Kingdom, or in France, because I'm also a French citizen. So I would vote for him to lead the country if he ran an election. And we'd be very lucky if this was still an absolute monarchy to have him. Now, of course, the problem with the absolute monarchies is then it's lucky. You get someone like Charles and life is good and the country is prosperous and doing well. And then you get, the next generation might be great, or it might be a complete disaster where you just plunge into wars and plunge into economic catastrophe. Oh, wait, that sounds a lot like the elected officials we have now in the USA and in the UK. War, economic disaster, and we voted for them. Anyway, I'm not necessarily a royalist monarchist, but I'm saying that it's the luck of the draw with them. It's also the luck of the draw in a democratic election. Yes. I am not 100% sold on democracy. Let's just put it that way. If the society and all the citizens were enlightened beings and educated beings, then yes, we would vote for the wisest and the best among us to lead us. Unfortunately, the society, everybody in the society, the majority are not enlightened and wise beings. And that's not making a critical comment. I'm not judging someone for not being educated or enlightened. It's okay. But do they make the best decisions? Do they know what the best decision is going to be for their own well-being? Do they always make the best choices when it comes to their own food or hygiene or well-being or financial or credit? Know? The answer is no. And so you then vote for someone. And am I making the best decision? Well, if I'm enlightened and I'm wise and I don't self-sabotage right and left, then I'm sure. But at this point in our society, I think it's equally a gamble to have a democracy versus an absolute monarch. It's equally risky because you can have a tyrant or you can have a benevolent leader, whether it's a democratically elected or whether it's not, whether it's inherited because of some divine right they think the family has. And in many ways, I think it's actually less of a risk and less of a gamble to go with the royal family at this point than to go with the elected officials. I think it's actually more risky to vote for the elected people right now. And I base that on my limited experience in the USA, in France, and the UK in elections and politics there. So I can't speak for the entire world or the whole planet or anything, but that's my opinion in the 3 countries that I am a citizen of and that I can exercise the right to vote for. And I know it's probably going to be a very unpopular opinion, especially with American audiences. But with the level of corruption that happens in politics, I think it's probably less risky to have, that privileged elite family there leading the country, because you get it anyway, because you can't argue that the privileged elite don't run the United States. I mean, if I wanted to run for, or if, I don't stand a chance. You have to be, have gone to the right school and have enough money and be from a, renowned enough family. You can't just be some nobody out of nowhere. So I think that's an interesting debate that we don't need to have, because your show isn't about that. But we wanted to talk about the king, and I wanted to express my opinion on him because I wanted to potentially bust some myths around it, because I've observed him for many decades, and I think 98% of the criticism leveled against him is unfair. Is potentially criticism for his mother, who seemed to be beyond reproach, and God bless Queen Elizabeth, and she was a lovely person, but some of the criticism probably should have gone to her. Some of the criticism might have more rightly been to somebody else, but and of course some of it is earned by him, but I'd say 98% of the attacks that he's suffered over his life, unfair and unjustified. He ain't that bad, is my opinion. And that's my opinion. Again, having met the guy, but I'm not friends with him. I don't hang out with him. And so it's I can't say that I know him intimately. But that's my opinion, if you want to know.
I love that. But again, we also media, people, a lot of times it's fake news, right? Because people say things, paparazzi, they do things to sell papers. So how much of it is true anyway? I'm just putting it out there. We don't really know. And it's all very well to criticize people and to judge people when you really don't know the full story. And that's another thing that it's so easy to do within our society, right? Not even, I mean, people like on the king's status. I mean, I don't know him. I'm just talking from what you're saying. But on that kind of status, they get even more criticism than we do, as just working as entrepreneurs and trying to get out into the world, right? So it's very interesting dynamic that we're living in right now.
And I mean, the way I look at it is, you can't deny that he has lived a privileged life. You can't deny it. He wasn't born in a slum in Africa, right? He's lived a privileged life. The way I like to look at it is, it's equally bad to be judgmental and criticize and condemn him for that as it would be to criticize and condemn somebody who has grown up in the slums in Harlem. It's like or Cabrini Green in Chicago. I mean, why would you do that? It's not he didn't choose to be born there. So what I like to look at is, number one, I don't like to criticize, condemn with people at all. But what I like to look at is, it's more important what he's done with it. Because you look at the privilege of his siblings and other people who've done nothing with all of the privilege other than just live up a lavish lifestyle. And then you look at what he's done, and honestly, most of it is unpublicized. Like, over his lifetime, he has started 20 charities. 20. Now, I think there's still 17 of them open, but he started 20 charities to help people and to help animals and to help the environment and to help architecture, passionate about architecture and preserving historical monuments and stuff. And he's been very entrepreneurial in what he's done. And he's the only royal family member that's actually profitable, meaning from his various organizations, he actually brings money in. He doesn't take so much taxes out, although now as king, with all the pomp and ceremony, that's probably changed. But as prince, he was actually bringing money in at the time versus everyone else who didn't. So, anyway, the point is that he always did that kind of thing. That's how he exercised the privilege. That's what he did with it. And you look at like someone like Oprah Winfrey. What did she do with her underprivileged, her very difficult background? She made one of the biggest success stories in history of it, a multi-billion-dollar media empire. Love her or hate her, you can't argue with that. She wasn't born with privilege. She was born with minus privilege. So it's what you do with it. And nobody has the pressure to do anything. Like I could compare myself with Oprah and think I'm a loser, right? So nobody has the pressure to do anything, just like Charles didn't have it. He didn't have to do any of that. He could have just lived it up, enjoyed himself, and that's it. And so it's what you do with it, in my opinion, that counts. And that's what I admire about it, is it's what he's done with it. He's made the most that he could, and maybe someone else in that position could do more. I don't know. But within the compass of his attainment, he was able to do the most with what he was given. And like I said, when I met him, I felt compassion, I felt caring, I felt kindness, I felt no arrogance, no superiority, which was remarkable because I was expecting, at least some superiority. All his people certainly wanted me to bow and make sure the protocol was followed, but he didn't seem to care about any of that. I thought that was really cool.
That
Very,
is
very
cool. That is very, very cool. I love that. I just want to go back to something you were saying about what people do. What did I ask Justin about his meeting with the king? Watch out for part 2 of this exciting series. Thank you for watching.